Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into, well, a pretty chaotic world, isn't it? Global trade and the whole mess around tariffs in 2025. It feels like this constant state of flux. Our mission, like always, just make sense of these complex legal rulings, the economic hits, and what it actually means for businesses day to day, so you can stay ahead.
Welcome to Logistics Pulse, sponsored by Mothership. Skip the broker to save big on LTL shipments, or deliver same day nationwide.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because, if this tariff volatility isn't just a temporary storm, if it's the new climate, what does that really mean for how businesses plan, not just for next quarter, but maybe for the next 10 years?
Exactly. You've hit it right there. This isn't just about one court case or some blip that'll disappear. What we're really seeing unfold now is, well, it's a moment that highlights a much deeper shift, a structural one. Tariff volatility, it's become, embedded in how global commerce works now. It's not something you just wait out anymore. It is the new normal. And the stakes are huge. We're talking trillions in trade flows, obviously, but also, fundamentally, about the future reach of executive power. How much say does a president actually have on trade? That's all up in the air. It really changes the game for how companies have to operate.
Yeah, but how? I mean, is this totally new territory? Have we seen legal fights like this over a president's trade powers before? Or is this genuinely different? Because the big thing driving all the chatter right now is that federal appeals court ruling. The one that basically said most of President Trump's big global tariffs were unlawful. Just think about the waves this sends out. Companies are stuck in this, like limbo. Are they getting refunds, or did new tariffs just pop up under some other rule? Or is it just going to be this constant legal back and forth, maybe new orders, Congress stepping in? What are the sort of hidden costs here beyond the obvious money?
Well, what's fascinating here is the court itself. The Federal Circuit, it's a specialized appeals court, right? Often the last stop for these kinds of trade and customs disputes. They came back with a 7-4 decision. That split, 7-4, it really tells you how divided even expert judges are on interpreting these presidential emergency powers. The ruling came down pretty hard on President Trump's use of those powers for tariffs on this scale, specifically Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act. The majority was really clear, emphasizing a basic constitutional point. It's Congress that has the power to set tariffs. So this isn't just about these specific tariffs. It's about who holds the reins on trade policy moving forward. Is it Congress? Is it the White House? That sets a huge precedent.
So it's less about if we have tariffs and more about who decides.
Precisely. That's the core of it, and that's the big shift. Now, of course, there was a strong dissent in the court. 4 judges disagreed. They argued for broader presidential power, especially in national security areas. And that view, well, it mirrors how President Trump has always framed these tariffs vital for the economy, vital for military strength. And now this whole constitutional question, it's heading for the Supreme Court. So the final word isn't in yet. But the legal ground itself is definitely shifting, challenging how much leeway presidents have had for decades.
Okay, so that sets the legal scene. But let's shift gears to the real-world impact, the dollars and cents, the jobs. How is all this legal uncertainty hitting the economy, hitting businesses like yours, especially, say, in manufacturing? The Institute for Supply Management, their August PMI, that's the Purchasing Managers Index, kind of key health check for manufacturing. It came in at 48.7%. And remember, anything below 50 means contraction. So manufacturing is still struggling, even with that little bump in orders over the summer. But here's the kicker, what really jumped out at me. Nearly 9 out of 10 manufacturers surveyed listed tariffs as a top worry. 9 out of 10, that's huge.
It absolutely is. And those worries are very real, very practical. Think about it from a manufacturer's perspective.
Yeah.
You're trying to figure out your costs for parts or materials coming in. How can you price your own products accurately for the next quarter if you don't know what those input costs will be? So naturally, that leads to hesitation. Do you hire more people? Do you invest in new equipment? Executives are, understandably, cautious about committing capital when the rules might change tomorrow. It puts the whole sector in a vulnerable spot. And it's not just the direct costs, There are wider inflation risks, too. Factories are already hiking what they call factory gate prices. That's the price before it gets shipped or marked up for retail, just to cover these higher tariff-related costs. If the duties stick around, or even if just the uncertainty continues, well, that could really fuel inflation across the board.
And the amounts involved are just mind-boggling, right? The actual tariff revenue.
Oh, absolutely. The U.S. Treasury, they've pulled in over $140 billion in tariff money just this fiscal year alone. Now, imagine if a big chunk of that suddenly needs to be refunded. We could be talking about the government owing billions back to importers. And remember, many importers might be foreign companies, or they're dealing with goods specifically targeted from certain countries. It wouldn't just blow a bigger hole in the federal deficit, it would also create this massive administrative tangle. Diplomatic headaches, too, as everyone scrambles for their share. Think of the customs paperwork and the markets. They've already reacted. Stocks took a dip as traders tried to figure out, okay, do tariffs get rolled back, or does this just mean new kinds of disruption are coming?
Okay, so we have the legal battle, the economic ripples. Let's drill down into the arteries of it all, the logistics and supply chains. How are they actually managing this constant state of, well, whiplash? For the logistics folks, the carriers and shippers, that appeals court ruling hasn't really changed daily operations much. Yet. The tariffs are still technically in effect until October 14th. And most people seem to be just, waiting to see what the Supreme Court does before they make any big moves on sourcing. And apparently a lot of smart shippers already stocked up earlier in the year trying to get ahead of potential hikes. That gave them a bit of breathing room, I guess. But that can't last forever, can it?
No, it can't. And even just waiting, this holding pattern, it has real costs. The uncertainty itself is expensive. You've got freight forwarders, customs brokers, just constantly answering questions from clients. What if we get a refund? How does it work? Should I pay this new invoice? Oh, importers are stuck in the middle. Do they eat the extra costs themselves, which hurts their bottom line? Or do they pass it on to customers, which could make them less competitive? It's a tough call. But here's the really critical point. If we, connect this to the bigger picture, industry leaders are saying, look, even if these specific Trump-era tariffs get struck down by the Supreme Court, don't assume the problem goes away. New tariffs, new levies are probably going to follow, just under different legal justifications. So volatility, it's basically baked into global supply chains now. It's like constantly adjusting your sails, but you don't know if the wind's about to change direction completely or if a hurricane's brewing just over the horizon.
So it's not a matter of if there will be trade barriers, but maybe which ones and why. Always something. That really changes the whole mindset.
Exactly. That's the shift. Take Section 232 investigations, for instance. Those are the ones based on national security concerns, right? That's a totally different legal track than the Section 301 tariffs, which were more about unfair trade practices. And they're still active, looking into everything from copper to pharmaceuticals. So we're seeing these very specific commodity-focused duties spreading. The deeper reality, the thing businesses need to grasp, is that this tariff volatility, which maybe felt like a temporary crisis, is now just part of the policy landscape. It's a constant. So you can't afford to just sit back and wait for things to stabilize. You have to adapt to a world where the rules can change fast, where supply chains are tangled up in politics, and where the courts are actively defining the limits of presidential power.
Which leads us right to the key question for you, listening right now. Okay, given all this swirling uncertainty, what can you actually do? How do you prepare, protect your business? How do you build that flexibility, that agility, when the ground rules themselves feel like they're shifting?
Yeah, this raises that crucial question. How do businesses cope when trade rules can basically flip overnight? And the answer, again and again, comes back to agility. That's your best defense, really. Okay, so for shippers, the absolute must-do is meticulous record keeping. Keep bulletproof documentation of every tariff payment, every import. Think of it like saving tax receipts, but maybe even more critical. Because if refunds are eventually ordered, having those detailed, accurate records means you can get your money back quickly. Companies that just rely on their broker and don't have good internal systems, they could face serious delays, maybe miss out altogether. Seriously, investing now in better compliance and audit systems could pay off big time down the road.
Right. Getting your paperwork in order now is key.
Definitely. Now, for carriers and freight forwarders, you need to brace for, well, a potential deluge. Surges in customer questions, a huge administrative load. Imagine if mass refunds require manual filing, your customs teams could be absolutely swamped. So, the smart move here, the competitive edge, comes from being proactive. Brief your clients, help them understand what's happening, offer streamlined support for potential refunds. That kind of transparency and help, that builds incredible trust and loyalty, especially when things are so uncertain.
Okay, makes sense. Proactive communication is vital. And for the leaders managing the whole supply chain.
Right. For supply chain leaders, the big message is don't hang your entire strategy on predicting court decisions. It's just too uncertain. Because even if these tariffs disappear, remember, other duties are likely coming. Section 232, maybe new Section 301s, maybe even tariffs tied to environmental standards. Who knows? So your focus has to be squarely on resilience. That means going beyond just, say, a China plus one approach. It means truly diversifying your sourcing, maybe looking at regional hubs, multiple origins for critical goods. It also means building flexibility into your contracts. Contracts that can adapt if conditions change suddenly, and doing serious scenario planning. What if tariffs on X go up by 20%? What's our plan? The real challenge now is navigating this inherent unpredictability. You need robust, adaptable plans.
That's incredibly helpful, really practical stuff. So wrapping this up, the main thread seems really clear. This tariff volatility, it isn't just a temporary headache we need to get through. It's become a permanent feature of how global business works. It's structural. And like we've talked about, building that agility, that resilience, being prepared, it isn't just smart, it's basically essential for survival, let alone success, in this new environment.
Absolutely. And maybe just leave you with this thought. In this environment where the political ground keeps shifting under our feet, the only real constant is change. Uncertainty is the certainty. And just understanding that, accepting it, that's probably the crucial first step towards building genuinely robust strategies. So the question for you is, how are you going to actively build that flexibility, that foresight into your own operations? What steps will you take to make sure your business doesn't just survive these shifts, but actually finds ways to thrive?
For more insights like these, don't forget to subscribe to Logistics Pulse on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.